Welcome to the Paisans podcast. We're your hosts, the brothers from other mothers, Dante, Dave, and Sark. Join us as we talk about current events, our wives, kids, or whatever else life is throwing at us this week. You're with the Paisans, you're with family. My father-in-law, Joe, he and his buddy bid. They were at a charity auction, and they bid. Somebody put up for auction like a week at this gorgeous villa in Tuscany, and he and his buddy put up for the auction and won it. So
nice.
We don't know if it's going to happen they were saying October, but now it's looking more like April of next year. We'll probably have this villa in Tuscany for a week. So I think it would just be me and Jen, and then Joe and his wife, and then his buddy and his wife, and then one other couple from among the family. It was kind of like we had this opportunity and we were like, shotgun, so
especially now that you've been there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. 100%. We were like, we've got to come back. Like, this is amazing. So
which is great, because you probably would have been a little skeptical if you hadn't been there before, because you were still not skeptical is probably the wrong word,
but just cautious, like a little more cautious.
Now you're like foaming at the bit to get back there, right?
Yes. Well, we went, we did Rome to start. We were there for like 10 days. So we did Rome to start. We did Rome for like 3 days, which was awesome. Cool things about Rome is, it's not representative of Italy the way that New York City is not representative of the United States. Rome is the history, you know what I mean? So Rome, where you do the Colosseum, you do the Vatican. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. Absolutely mind-blowing. The things that you learn right away is like that Italian and Italian American are very different. Like I knew this going in there, but like there's no Alfredo sauces. Like they don't do it. That's totally an American invention. They don't have any Alfredo sauces. They don't do like chicken Parmesan. They don't do spaghetti and meatballs. They'll do meatballs, and then you have just like a little bit of pasta on the side. Rome is really known for what they call cacio e pepe, which is cheese and pepper. And so it's really just like a rich Parmesan, cheesy Parmesan sauce, and then, crushed pepper. And that was fantastic.
Oh,
and, each serving, like it's not a huge serving. It's like the size of a plum, it's like, boom, just like a few, perfect. And it's like, that's actually perfect. And the pasta is just to die for, it's just to die for. They're so passionate about the food and everything that they cook. And they're so proud of the food and the cuisine that you don't get a bad meal anywhere, and some of the meals were just over the top delicious. The thing is, Rome is, again, it's very different from what you get when you leave Rome. So we go into Rome, we left Rome and we went to Florence. And we got to Florence and it was like, okay, it was much more like rustic and more like what we really expected from Italy, which was like little trattorias.
Yeah.
And lots of, and so you sit down, you get a glass of wine, you have a little bit of, like they'll bring you a little bit of bread, you get a small appetizer, a salad or something. Much more classic Italian, but again, not Italian American. Just everything is fresh. And there were more than one time where we ordered something on the menu and the guy said, well, it says zucchini, but we don't have zucchini because it's out of season. We have such and such, they have whatever's in season. And you're like, that's fantastic. I mean, of course, I said to Jen, I'm like, I don't think I've ever been told in the United States that something is out of season. It's just never once, I don't think, at a restaurant.
And maybe McDonald's, because I don't think that they have the McRib all the time.
It's like the McRib is not available. Or like a breakfast sandwich after 11 o'clock.
Oh, certainly unavailable.
It's out of season, sir. Out of season. Oh, I don't think they do that anymore. I think they serve breakfast all day now.
Right. Exactly.
So again, there's no such thing as out of season, even at McDonald's. But that was Florence. Really, to me, felt like classic Italy. Like, this is what is Italy. It's just like culture everywhere you turn. Like, it's just like, oh, let's go into this piazza. Oh, there's a huge church there. What's that church? Oh, that's the church of such and such. And like, oh, what's in there? And you'd be like, oh,
wow,
so and so's too. And you'd be like, oh, how did I not know about this in advance? And we literally stumbled upon the the 4-story, sorry, not 4 feet, the 4-story statue of Dante Alighieri outside of this church, the Santa Croce. And we're like, oh, what's in there? They're like, oh, there's Michelangelo's tomb, Machiavelli's tomb, Galileo's tomb, Marconi's tomb is in there. There's a memorial to Dante Alighieri, even though he's not actually in there. You're like, what? Okay, I guess we're going in here. Like, you literally just stumble on stuff, and then you come out and you're like, oh, throw a rock. Oh, look, there's another thing with classic, artwork that has never been seen before or since. Like,
and when you go in these places, like the mausoleum, it's not like this huge thing, right? Aren't they all right there? Are they all like right in the same room next to each other? That's
pretty much. I mean, it's a big church, but at the same time, like it's not so big that you can't walk it in. You're like, you can see everything. You walk in, you're like, boom, 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 boom. They're like right there in a row. Whoa. I know. It was like Galileo's tomb.
How the hell do you like process that too? While you're there.
It was crazy, man. And we found a lot of great stuff in Florence. Like, Florence really suited us well, I have to say. It was a beautiful city. I loved the culture. Everything was just so, it's like cobblestone streets. You're walking down these narrow streets that are just so old and have so much history, and the home, like, it's just beautiful all around you. And again, it's just so friggin' romantic. Like, everywhere you walk, you just want to hold hands and stop and, like, have a kiss, and then, grab a flower and give it to your wife. Like, it's so it's just so romantic. It was really, really amazing city. And then we went from there. We took a train from Rome to Florence, and then from Florence we rented a car and we drove to the western coast. That was when we went to Maremma. And in the Maremma region, there was a small town there, and we that's actually a resort. So we went to this little resort called Il Pelicano, which was a full-on 5-star resort. I mean, we did not belong there. Wow. I mean, it was crazy. Like, it reeked of money. And oh,
wow.
Like, here's an example. There's 2 restaurants. There's the main restaurant, and then there's the sort of lower tier restaurant. The lower tier restaurant, which they call the grill, you're buying like a Caesar salad for $34 to start off your meal. And then you're getting a $46 filet. That's the tier down restaurant. And then you're like, oh, how about the main restaurant? They're like, well, tonight's a 7-course tasting meal. You're like, oh, okay. So that's like $250 a person. Like, yeah, pretty much. Like, oh my God. Like, okay. I think we're driving into town, but having said that, it was so luxurious, and it was built into this mountain, and it was unbelievable. The views, and they just had these little platforms. Like, you sort of walk down these steps along the side of the mountain, and then there'd be like a little platform with 2 sun chairs in it. You just like sit there, and they have stacks and stacks of towels for you to just take. And then you could go down a little further, and then have a whole row of places with chairs. People are sunning in chairs. Like, it was just, oh my God, so extravagant. It was fantastic. And then, you could get
the hotels in the mountains is a really cool kind of concept, because we did that in the Amalfi Coast too. We were in a hotel that was literally built into a mountain. So you see the pictures and everything of how they did it. It's unbelievable. It's kind of crazy. Restaurants underneath, very similar. So it's like you walk down kind of these like windy paths, right? And you're just like on the water, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
So cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's just so cool. Yeah. We don't have anything like that here, So it was a magical experience. It really was. So we'll be going back for sure. And I'm going to be working on my Italian and my Babbel account, because I need to be able to speak at least a little bit. It was, oh man, I wanted to so bad.
They all spoke
mostly, but it was helpful to speak even a little bit of Italian.
Yeah.
Like, I can speak I can speak Spanish enough that I can kind of get by in like I can sort of speak when somebody doesn't speak any English or they speak very little English. I can help get by with it. But Italian, I was just, wow, I really can't say. I don't know anything.
That 1 year in college did not teach us much.
Taught me nothing.
I kept confusing it with Spanish, to be honest.
Me too. I did the same thing.
Because
it's exactly the problem I have.
Spanish throughout all of high school, even middle school. I think 8th grade we had to take Spanish. We had to take a language, and it was Spanish for us.
Yeah,
so like all that time, and you go into Italian.
Yeah, it's just
everything out of your mouth.
Too similar.
Spanish. Yeah, exactly.
It's too similar. I realize it's like a gear. It's like a shift that you have to do in your head. When I went to England a bunch of years ago, night, honey. When I went to England a bunch of years ago and I got to drive, I drove on the other side of the road. I drove on the left-hand side of the road, and the wheels on the right-hand side. And that took me about 2 days, maybe 3 days before I was like, this like sort of shift occurred in my head. And then I was able to be like, okay, I literally like flipped everything. I don't know how to explain how it happened, but I just suddenly like sort of locked in, and then I thought I was fine. I actually really started to enjoy it. I think it's one of those things, man, where if you get far enough, you'll be able to shift it in your mind where you won't do that and cross over to the Spanish. But and part of the problem with that is when we went to Costa Rica, I started speaking in Spanish, and I really wasn't thinking. Like, I wasn't thinking in English and then translating. I really did just start saying things in Spanish, I realized, and which was awesome. At the same time, it's like, that's why I probably resort to Spanish when I don't know what to say in Italian.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So anyway,
our brains, I'm trying to think at that age, because our brains were still sponges. We were still absorbing things. So somewhere in there, we retained Spanish.
The language window, the real language window for people, I want to say, is like 2 to like 6.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, you could learn like 20 different languages. Your brain will you'll pick it all up and decipher it all and have no problem. You really won't have any problem if you're like immersed in it. You will learn them all naturally. But after that, it gets harder and harder every year to like learn a new language. So even by 14, 15, it was like,
right.
It's hard, man. You got to really work.
So when you do it and then you stop doing it and then you try to pick it up, 15 years later, you haven't practiced that the whole time.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
you can remember a word here and there, but you're not going to remember how to put the sentence together necessarily. You might be like maybe small sentences.
Exactly.
That's how I felt in Italy too.
True.
I hadn't taken Italian since high school, and I barely remembered any of it.
I feel like there was something else that happened in this period that we were all busy. Like, all these things went down, and it was like we haven't had an episode. And I'm trying to remember like all the different topics that we want to talk about. We were talking about Dave's trip. We want to talk about my trip.
The big one was Terrence Howard on
I was
Joe
just going to
Rogan.
say that. Yeah,
that's what it was.
That's what it was.
Now that a few days have gone by, so just as a very quick bit of context, right? We were talking about the Terrence Howard interview on Joe Rogan. I was listening to it last weekend or whatever, 2 weeks ago, while I was doing things around the house. And it really took me a few minutes to figure out, like, I think this guy's like not all there. And I can't tell if he's like, on the one hand, he said some things that were like, okay, I think that's true. And some other things I'm like, I think that might be true too. Like, he actually said some things that I think are correct. So on the one hand, I don't want to dismiss him out of hand. But then he starts getting into these other things, and you're just like, he says he reached out to Neil deGrasse Tyson, and basically Neil deGrasse Tyson sent it back to him with like tons of red slashes in it effectively, and said like, no. And basically he was crazy. Like, I think you're crazy, like. So I've seen a couple of clips of that episode, like reels and things like on social media since then, but I have seen very little else about it. And I really thought it was going to kind of blow up. Like, people were going to want to talk about it. Like, it was a thing. Like, what the hell is wrong with this guy?
Here's the periodic table. you'll see hydrogen sitting all the way over there by itself, but they don't show that hydrogen has the same tone as carbon.
What do you mean by tone?
Same tone, same key of E. Same key of E. 40.5 hertz. The next one would be like 81 hertz. You go to silicone, it will double up and would be 162 hertz. You'll go to cobalt, and it'll be 324 hertz. It's, in that base, if you were to take the angles of incidence or the tones that they create, their color. Like you can turn color back into sound based upon, it's the same wavelength, it's just twice as long or much longer. So all you have to do is keep dividing light by 2.
Keep that up, Jimmy.
You keep dividing light by 2, and you'll ultimately get back to the audible sound of it.
Now, I'm curious, because here's my impression, and then I'd love to get each of your impressions. It took me about 15 to 20 minutes of hearing him go before I went, this dude is kind of rambling. Like he's sort of a little all over the place. And then he's doing a lot of talking about they, this, and them, and talking about they don't want the information to get out type of stuff, like using this language, like, and then he's making these very grandiose claims. Like he's straight up effective, like saying he's almost claiming, like he's comparing himself to Moses, I think at one point. And at one point, I think he did compare himself to Christ, like later on in the podcast. But he's talking about himself in these grandiose terms. He's like all this self-aggrandizing. And I'm like, this dude sounds like he's schizophrenic. Like he sounds like he's having a schizophrenic, like a manic episode.
And sort of unprompted too, right? Like it didn't take very long for him to start going down that path. And I think Rogan just asked him something pretty benign, like, what have you been up to, or what's going on? Or he said something about acting, and it went right to that.
Well, that's just it. Like with schizophrenics, it doesn't even matter what you ask them. They just start going, and then they become self-perpetuating, and they just go and they go and they go, and then they go off on tangents, and then tangents from those tangents, and they never think about going back. And they're, again, through the whole thing, talking about how awesome they are, how they've done this and how they created that. And all these classic things, like all these tropes that he was leaning right into, like they claim to have invented things. They claim to have found things, and that other people are oppressing them. And, and it was like, everything this guy's saying sounds like he's having a manic episode to me. And I couldn't figure out where Rogan was coming from. Like at first, I think it felt like he was like, I'm in a room with a dude who maybe is not psychologically all together. And the best thing I can do is just ask him questions and let him go. Yeah. And you notice Rogan barely spoke for a lot of that, a good portion of that. Like he just didn't even respond. Yeah. I'm curious of what your takes are. Like if you guys had similar thoughts, how long it took you to realize, if there was anything specific that set you to think this guy's off his rocker. Because I think some of what he was saying about the periodic table is actually true. I think some of what he said about this sort of unwinding thing, I think some of that is true. But then some of his other claims toward the end about inventing, like, he started making these claims. I was like, what?
The hydrogen, the proprietary hydrogen technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, I have all these patents.
That stuff was wild.
But I'm like,
yeah.
Right? I'm like, but you can patent anything. It doesn't mean that it actually works.
Right.
So
right.
Go ahead, guys. I'm curious to get your takes.
So, the first question that starts off this podcast is, he says something like, so what was your first, like, Terrence Howard is like, what's your first memory? And Rogan's like, I don't know. Like the normal answer is like, I don't know if I can even remember my first memory technically. And he's sitting there and he starts it off by saying, my first memory is when I'm 6 months in my mother's womb. So it's like right off the bat, you're starting this off and you're just like, I just don't know if I could take this man seriously if he's really seriously proclaiming this. And he's chalking it up to be him being like, I'm just different. It's like, billions of people have been born. No one has ever had a memory like this. I'm just different. I'm one of one. Without saying it, that's sort of what he was coming off with. So right off the bat, he kind of sets the tone with that. So
yeah,
I've been listening to Rogan's podcast for a long time. Like I like to kind of, I never actually said this to anyone, but I like to kind of humbly brag that I was there before he was really famous. Like I started listening to him in like 2017, something like that. I don't think this guy's in it to like be like, oh my God, this is gonna get so many views. I don't think that even matters to him. He's getting paid from Spotify either way if no one listens to that.
Yeah.
I think he's genuinely curious to hear what this man has to say, because he keeps saying through it the whole time. He's like, what you're saying is pretty crazy. I don't totally understand it. If you're right, though, this is going to change everything, right? So he's open-minded to the fact that he could be right, because he knows.
Did say that.
Yes.
Right. And Rogan isn't an expert, but he's somewhat interested. He's sort of knowledgeable in some of this, but not really. And he's just kind of curious as to why this guy has this crazy thought, and why someone like a Neil deGrasse Tyson would shoot him down immediately, right? So he just wants to hear that side of it, and he's being open-minded. I mean, he kept saying, let's do this again. We could keep having multiple podcasts. So I don't know, because a lot of it too, I don't understand. I can't pretend like I know the technicalities of everything he's saying. So he could be true, but yeah, no, Don, I agree with you about some of the things you were saying in terms of just like, is it true? Is he having some sort of episode? Is he just kind of like a little off? Like, is he kind of just like this like guy who is pretty smart and brilliant, but then he's just like a little wacky? Like, I don't know. You know, I'm not sure.
Right. Which is it? Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't do a lot, right? Since Avengers,
not anymore.
You don't really see him in anything.
Not anymore. Well, he did that show Empire.
It seems like he's...
Yeah, and that show was riddled with controversy.
Yes.
You know? Beyond the Jesse Smollett thing. I mean, the Jesse Smollett thing was a huge thing, but even without that, there was a whole bunch of controversy with that show. I think they had all kinds of drama behind the scenes. And he implied that, you know, Disney turned around and screwed him after Iron Man. Like, we don't want, basically, we want to pay you virtually nothing. Not what we offered, not what we originally agreed to pay you. And his manager said, well, sorry, but we're not doing that. I said, all right, thanks. You're done. Goodbye. Now, let's assume that that's exactly as he said it. I have to assume that on their end, they were like, I don't care what we got to do. We got to get rid of this guy. You know? And it seems like that's what's going on, is that nobody can work with him because they're like, this guy's off his rocker. You know, like.
Imagine him just grabbing like the cameraman and starting to talk to him about like his theories of the elements and hydrogen technology. It's like, you know, we're trying to shoot a show and this guy's having an episode.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say. Like, he was able to get along in acting for quite a few years. I mean, like, he's been in a bunch of things. You know, he was nominated for an Oscar more than once, I think.
He's been a big actor, for a long time.
So it begs the question, was he always like this? And
that's
somehow it's been tolerated? Or has something changed? Like, is he, for example, or perhaps surrounded by so many yes men, yes people, who entertain his delusions of grandeur and yes him to like, absolutely, you know, and help him perpetuate this like fantasy world that he's living in. I don't know. I don't know, but it's odd to me that so many times he's had interactions with people which end with them basically saying this guy's not right. Yeah. It's like one person, even two people, I might go, maybe it's bad luck or whatever, but there's a lot of different fronts, you know, for him.
Have you guys ever seen interviews with him previously, like years past, or like when he was doing Avengers, and was he off? Did he seem off?
I have. And yes, he's always been off. Yes. Not like this, because he's never been on a long form thing, but like awkward interviews with like reporters who are working for entertainment online, you know, or like TV entertainment magazine shows, you know, Inside Edition or whatever, not Inside Edition, but you know what I'm thinking, you know, Entertainment Tonight type of thing. And they were asking him like these, you know, lighthearted questions. Oh, how do you feel about that? You know, it's all stupid, quite frankly. It's all vapid. And he's there like, now, don't quote me on this. Like I can't tell you exactly who it was or whatever, but I would swear like I saw at least one interview with him. And it was this one of these things where he was taking it so seriously and it was awkward and uncomfortable because they're trying to be lighthearted and asking him silly questions. And he's kind of like, how could you be asking me about those things? Like these things are so inconsequential.
What's your first memory?
As if he doesn't know what the hell he's there for. Yeah.
It's
How do I feel about playing War Machine? What does that matter?
What's your first memory?
I think like maybe they let him keep part of the uniform or something, you know, like part of the costume that he's referring to as the hydrogen technology.
It's like, such a piece of work.
I mean,
what did you
this
think,
is what I was thinking, man.
Yeah.
I felt like, to your comment about Rogan, about how Rogan was treating him like, or that he came to this realization pretty quickly. I agree with that because I feel like Rogan has been quicker with other guests to call bullshit.
Right.
He was pretty soft on Terrence. Like he could have easily been like, bro, what? Like
say
that again? You did what?
Exactly.
Right, you know, let's look this up. Hydrogen what? You know, and instead he's like, okay, well, look, you know, that could be amazing if that's a real thing.
I totally agree, Mike. I think he would have been more like, well, hold on. Let's look at these blueprints. This says that it ejects hydrogen. So how does that work actually? Like he would have pressed him harder.
I feel like he would.
Because I have a feeling that he's using all these big fancy words and he's making all these references and then he's got these, you know, he's patenting these designs for like perpetual motion machines. And it's like, right, but you know, it doesn't make it work just because you build this thing and it says this will go like this, which will do this other thing. The words don't make it actually function.
Now you see
this is all you.
Yeah, this look at the inventor. Go up a little bit and slide over. It says Terrence Howard.
Yeah.
Worldwide patent 2010. It was abandoned. Now go to cited by, and look at all the companies. And if you look at the patent, these companies have all earned. They have multi-billion-dollar companies they've built off of my patent. Just roll through.
Sony, Microsoft, Amazon,
Hewlett Packard.
Yeah.
Keep going. IBM, and it's still making money. This patent has earned over $7 trillion.
And you didn't get a piece.
And I haven't gotten a penny of it.
He was, now it's coming back to me. He was implying that one of the technologies that he's patented is likely the technology that's behind some of the UFOs that have been reported by our military that are doing like things that break the laws of physics. And so he was implying that not only does his idea work, but that it's been stolen, likely by the government, and has been produced and is being tested and is so far in advance that our pilots don't recognize what's being seen. And of course it's being covered up that way. Now, again, you maybe go back and listen if maybe I didn't get that quite right, but I believe there was a whole angle on that. Part of the technology he's promoting. They were talking about these UFOs and how they move in certain ways that they've said like break the laws of physics, and he was there basically saying like, right, but this technology would allow us to like do those things, and now you can see that they're testing it. So like he's trying to say that that's evidence that what he's saying is real and works, you know. And it's like, this is classic schizophrenic like thinking. Like, let me back into this situation. Here's a thing where they're claiming this other thing happens. Well, I happen to have built a technology that would allow that to be true,
and I patented it. You know,
and I've patented it, but the reason nobody recognizes it is because the government's covering it up. Obviously, like it's so obvious.
What do you think about the 1 × 1 = 2 thing? Like he kept bringing that up, and I was like,
man.
what the hell is this guy talking about? Like
that's a perfect Dave. Thank you. That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. He just kept like those are the moments where I'm like, no, this guy's like not right, because he's repeating this stuff over and over again, and you're like, but you're not explaining what that means. Then he talks in these grandiose analogies, and again, like everything he says is like got this tone of like as if there's so much more on top of it that we're all aware of and we're all agreed is real. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
yes,
Cat Williams talking was like this
I
too.
was just going to say that was very similar to that interview.
Right?
Very
it's like
similar.
Everything you say is, it's like you only say, you know, like, well, you know, like a lot of like eyebrows up and like wink, wink. And I'm like, I don't know what the fuck. I don't know if there's an inside joke here. I'm not in on it. What are you talking about? You know? And he had a lot of that. So yeah, Dave, I'm sorry. The 1 times 1 equals 2, because you have one thing, and to have one instance of that thing, you can't have. You've already got an instance of that thing, so there's always more than one of that thing. And you're like, what? It's like an Escher painting,
like model, you know, together too during the interview, right? He was like fidgeting with that thing, like
was he?
Whatever that flower thing that he was talking about.
Oh,
yeah, he was fidgeting with this
flower of life.
It was very weird. He was like constructing it while he was talking.
Yeah.
And not looking at it, sort of like constructing it, but staring.
Is that right? I didn't watch that.
I didn't watch it
I watched
either.
part of the thing, but I didn't see. He's not connecting to reality anymore. That, or he's on such a level that the rest of us, like, we just can't keep up with him. Like, that's, to me, I was like, there's a couple of points I was like, if I'm totally wrong on this, maybe this dude's a genius and we're just all like living in 2D. You know, we just cannot keep up with him.
But did Tyson just like basically write him off, or did he? Do you know? Like, did he say that anything that he said had merit?
Pretty much no. I mean, some of the very basic things he said, but again, you're hearing Terrence Howard's recollection of what Neil deGrasse Tyson said to him. So
now I want to research this more.
Yeah,
I want to see what deGrasse Tyson said. I
have a feeling that it's exactly what we're talking about. That he ran into Terrence Howard at something and was like, "Oh, hey, we're both celebrities. We should talk to one another and be friendly." And he's like, "All right." And he didn't realize that Terrence Howard is off his rocker. And so Terrence Howard sends him this whole dissertation, and he's reading it. And he's like, "These are the ramblings of a manic schizophrenic." And so he responds and basically says, like, "Look, these are all these issues with what you're saying here. This isn't right." And Terrence Howard's response to that is, "Oh, you're part of the conspiracy," you know? And so that's how he's retelling it to Rogan. So it's hard for me not to imagine that that's kind of the reality of it. I'm not a Neil deGrasse Tyson fan. I'll be honest with you.
Same.
I'm really not a fan of his. In fact, I've got some serious issues with him. But in this case, I don't think he was wrong, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of him either. First of all, I don't think he's particularly a nice person. I mean, he doesn't really, he seems like he's got an ego for sure.
Yes. He reminds me of Fauci in that he seems to really relish this, I'm a super genius and you're all just like, on the level of like thinking on the level of insects to me.
Yep.
Like it just comes off real arrogant. And then, I hear him say things that I'm like, oh my gosh, he's just so pandering. He just really strikes me as pandering. Like his biggest concern is being famous and being a celebrity.
Sometimes I think you don't have any idea of what's important.
Well, actually, an idea of what's important is as close as we can ever come to any definition of importance.
He's not a scientist anymore, Now, whether that's really true or not, I mean, what is it? But anyway, my point is simply, it's not like I'm a big Neil deGrasse Tyson fan. I'm not trying to defend his position. But in this case, I think he was probably right. Like this guy's nuts. There's no nice way to say it. I'm sure he's going to say like,
Terrence who?
Well, and I was wondering because he also took a shot at, Neil at Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, I was going to say that before. He definitely did take a shot at him.
Yeah, and you got to wonder, like Robert Downey Jr. by all accounts is not he's a pretty generous guy, and he's not a guy who forgets people who did him favors. Like, he stood up for Mel Gibson when nobody was standing up for Mel Gibson.
Yeah, he did.
So again, that's anecdotal, but I thought, geez, like it's sort of, I'm shocked he's taking a shot at Robert Downey Jr. Like that's Iron Man, like and that
What was
dude's
he taking
beloved.
a shot at him about?
He basically implied that when they were casting Iron Man, they didn't want Robert Downey Jr. They wanted somebody else, and that Terrence Howard, said, "No, give him a chance. Like you should let him do it." And so they agreed. They acquiesced and agreed to hire Robert Downey Jr. Okay.
Yeah, he was claiming he gave a part of his salary to give it to Robert Downey Jr. He was like, like, if you need $1 million, like, take it from my salary. Like, that's what he was claiming.
Now, mate, look, do I know that's not true? Of course I don't know that's not true. Do I believe that that's true? No, I don't believe that's true. Having said that, then the shot he took at Robert Downey Jr. was basically to say, well, when they turned around and tried to screw me, and offer me, 1/8 of what they had promised me for the next movie, he didn't stand up for me or say anything.
Right.
He didn't return the favor. The way he said it was like he didn't return the favor for me. So he definitely framed it like he owes me one and he didn't come through. So it's just like, dude.
About how they bumped into each other a few years after this, apparently. Like they saw each other at Robert Downey Jr. and Terrence Howard bumped into each other at someone's wedding. And Terrence Howard apparently confronted him about it. And Robert Downey Jr. was like, "Oh, well, it all worked out, man." Like, it was very much like, "Oh, it all worked out, so no harm, no foul" type of thing.
Right.
And then he kind of played it off as like, but I moved on from that type of, like, he was above all that.
Yeah. Obviously he moved on from that. And the crazy thing is, man, I wouldn't be surprised if that part is sort of true. Like if you're Robert Downey Jr. and he comes and he confronts you, what are you going to say other than it all worked out, man?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the alternative is to go, dude, you're a freaking nut bar. Okay. And we couldn't have you on set. I'm sorry, you were untrustworthy. We weren't going to make 2 more movies with you. We had to get rid of you quick and you were a problem right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
He could have said that, but he's probably too diplomatic.
Absolutely.
And, so all these things, all these signs to me point to like this dude. It's like if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck and it quacks like a duck.
For Robert Downey Jr., I mean, that is, for all intents and purposes, if Terrence Howard is nuts, then that is Robert Downey Jr. looking out for him. Because to your point, he could have easily been like, what? This guy's a freaking crackpot.
Exactly.
And he played it down. So
yes,
Terrence Howard wouldn't see that, but.
Well, exactly.
Right.
It sounds like a classic example where you have a person who's sane, who's like trying to be cool and downplay a thing and not humiliate somebody. And then you have somebody who's losing their marbles or lost their marbles. And they're like, they don't know how to handle it. They make a big thing and they make accusations and, other people are just trying to politely, quietly say, like, that's okay, fine. I'll take the hit. You can call me these things and say whatever. It's fine. Are you okay? Like when it's all of a sudden, like, are you okay? Are you getting the help that you need?
Mm-hmm.
That's how it feels. There's also these people who, it happens in every profession. It's like your reputation starts to precede you. It's like you're impossible to work with. Right. You can't, you're unreliable. You're flaky on set. You're either doing drugs or you're not showing up when you're supposed to, or you're constantly arguing, questioning, my character wouldn't do this. Your debate, everything is a wrestling match with you. It's like nobody wants to work with that person. Nobody wants to work with that person. And inevitably you see that person complaining, oh, people said that I'm difficult because, I have an opinion and because of this and that and the other, but it's like, no. Who got that? What was the woman's name? She was in that movie Knocked Up with...
Oh, Katherine Heigl.
Yes. That happened to her. Now, she's starting to come back. She's getting some roles again, but she was clearly blacklisted. Like, I think when she left that... What was that? She was on that Grey's Anatomy. She was on Grey's Anatomy, and she left Grey's Anatomy, and I think it was one of those weird things where, like, I'm trying to remember... One thing
I think she was trying to be a movie star at that point. I think she left the show to do the movies like Knocked Up, and because she had a run of movies there for a while.
Yes, that's right. But I remember too with the movie Knocked Up, it was like she made the movie, had a great time making the movie, or by all accounts had a great time making the movie. And then she reported, like when she was doing interviews and stuff, she was like, well, certain jokes made me uncomfortable. Doing these certain situations made me uncomfortable. And she was saying stuff, and Seth Rogen was like, dude, you were there like cracking jokes with the rest of us. Like you were hanging with us and making raunchy jokes. And you suggested this other thing and that thing. Like it just came off really bad. That stuff catches up with you. You know, if you're too difficult to work with, people are like, it's not worth the headache.
Yeah.
Look at the kid who just played The Flash. You know, here's a guy who had it all going for him, and then he ruined it for himself. He'll be lucky if he ever works again at this point. He really will.
Although people forget, you know, like to your like.
Yeah, you're right.
You could see him again and be like, "Oh, remember that dude?" But yeah,
you're right.
Now kind of screwed.
You might be right, Michael. I shouldn't speak so soon. Give it 10 years, and he will be back. You know, and everyone will be in his corner. Everybody loves a comeback story.
Or he's a changed person. You know, I realize my flaws, and it's all about my dad and my mom. Had nothing to do with Hollywood.
Blame them. Yeah, exactly. All right, man. Well, then listen, Mike. Let's let you roll.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Glad we got to talk to you. Dave, you and I, let's text.